this overarching project that I'm working on is sort of in the now. What are we doing to lean into creating the world we choose to see? It's seemed really important in some individual's story about how they got to where they are so that they have the perspective that they do.
I mean, that to me is like how we change the world, is by examining ourselves and what trauma have I endured and how can I heal it inside of myself? Because whatever I am, toxic or tonic, I'm emanating in the world. When we grow, it's like the things we're asking all the time internally. Am I safe? Am I loved? And is it okay to be myself? And how we construct our reality around that. Understanding our own body, system, trauma experiences, becoming self-aware. I'm more pulled by the vision of what I want to create in my future, as opposed to being stuck in the painful past, really letting myself turn the mud of what I've experienced into gold. And then that's when I feel like I'm integrated enough inside of myself where I can actually honestly hold space for others.
And so, Acacia Land in the house today. So tell me, Acacia, how how did you get to where you are?
Wow, what a story. It's a big story. I think that I oftentimes think about like the psychology of how we grow up, and I feel like when we grow, it's like the things we're asking all the time internally, whether we realize it or not, is, am I safe? Primary. Am I loved? And is it okay to be myself? And how we construct our reality around that. And for me personally, I grew up, my parents were in love. I'm one of five, there's six girls in my family. My parents were very hippie and, like my was a very free thinker. And one of my older sisters had injury with some medical stuff. So my parents kind of went down a rabbit hole of like researching a lot of healthy options for living. We grew up vegan, growing our own food. My parents were anti-sugar, anti-medical, anti-everything, and really teaching us to use critical thinking when we enter into the world. I mean, I've always also been like a bit rebellious, not a bit, no, I've been very rebellious and speaking up and seeing things as they are, as opposed, just like really, uh, it's so, if someone was like, don't go to that dark closet, I'm like, I'm the first one there, like opening the door. I want to see what's in there. Like, what are we so afraid of? And then, so, my dad got into a bad car accident when I was about 8 years old, and he developed really intense asthma, and I think it caused a brain injury. Anyways, we drove out to California from I grew up in the Midwest, like in Canada, and he ended up passing when we got to LA, in the car, and I was the one with him, and I
Wow.
was very, very close with him. So after that, my mom, she, of course, that was her love of her life. And I understand that now, being an adult. But as a child, there was a lot of neglect, and, she was severely depressed, and alcoholism, and dating very toxic, abusive men. So I kind of went from this like beautiful, nurtured environment to basically hell. And I got kicked out at 15, and it was very, I had to grow up very I got kicked out for speaking up against some of the abuse that was happening. And again, so it's like, for me, my mom would call my sister the peacemaker because she kept her mouth shut. And for me, the peacemaker is the one that wants to pull up the rug and talk about the elephants in the room, and because we can't really truly have peace in my experience unless things are talked about and brought out of the surface, and really like dissected, like why are we acting the way we are. There's a reason for it. So, I studied psychology in school, and then I started doing heart circles with a local person, Tej, and just really being a part of communities that were willing to address the truth and speak about how we feel and what's going on actually inside of our bodies authentically and vulnerably, and how do we build these bridges with each other. And then went on to study with the Heart Math Institute and Stan Tatkin on the a psychobiological approach to couples therapy. So it's like early attachment wounding. And I've done shadow work with another man here. He moved, Robert Augustus
Oh,
Masters.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so I've spent years doing work with him. And I call the work I do now, it's like relational technology, because I feel like that's a really crucial piece that we are needing, is understanding our own body system trauma experiences, becoming self-aware, so that that to me is like how we change the world, is by examining ourselves and what trauma have I endured and how can I heal it inside of myself, because whatever I am, toxic or tonic, I'm emanating in the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow, that's a lot. You've been through a lot of educational stuff. I got to sit with Robert for one weekend. We did
oh,
a men's thing years ago, and I found it to be incredibly powerful. He's got his fingers in some really amazing aspects of the human experience. That fascinating work. You find yourself now in a place of, like we all do, um, creating your own life, and I'm going to assume and maybe project on you that there's a piece of a desire to help the world outside of just yourself, to help your community, to help the larger sphere. How does that land on you currently?
I feel like I've always been like spearheading things in our community. In the last 5 years, I would say I was like a little bit more reserved and in healing, because I went through a very traumatic experience with
Mm,
an ex that I was with. I've just kind of been rebuilding myself. I have been working a little bit with Tej with the We Powered, he's calling it now, and it's heart circle work and creating these relational experiences. And I also am working with currently a business coach to develop. I'm developing my own work, and want to share on podcast. I'm ready to. I feel like I've healed and integrated myself enough from what happened to where I can start putting myself out in a bigger way again, and I'm really ready to do that now. So I feel like that's it's like really letting myself turn the mud of what I've experienced into gold. And then that's when I feel like I'm integrated enough inside of myself where I can actually honestly hold space for others.
yeah. Yeah, boy, that's a hard one. I know my personally my wounding in these has really come to the surface in these last few years. And as just a notoriously jolly guy, I've just been the happy guy my whole life. That it took decades for some of this things that I had not been looking at, just sort of putting in the emotional backpack for all these years, and and so at this point, it's like, oh, who knew that the jolly guy would have these massive anger issues? It's like, well, anybody who was paying attention would know. But I was in the forest, and so to see the things that are unfolding for me now, coming in contact with these pieces of my shadow, and pieces that I still don't have very good vocabulary for, a lot of it. Um, I had a traumatic brain injury about 3 years ago, and was completely out of it for a year and a half. It took me a long time to reassemble myself. And in that reassembling and trying to put things on, this discussion around priorities is was a really a major piece to this project that we're in on now. That as I was trying to put together myself, I just had no idea for a long time how to even put one foot in front of the other. I had no idea how to prioritize anything. I did not know the simplest things of what to do, and now as I've come back online, if you will, I got myself, I find myself with this sort of what feels like a childlike curiosity about, oh, this is a way of the way these things can work. And now I'm seeing how mired I was in my own, I guess, vocabulary wise, mired in my own illusions about the way the world works and my position in it. And so now, after this fairly dramatic experience of trying to piece myself back together, I find the unknowingness about what to do next. And I find myself looking out to mentors and things, looking out to people who may have an idea about where my next foot goes. How do I take the next steps? And so you caught my attention when you said that you are, coming off of some traumatic experiences in your life in relatively recent history, and coming out of that and taking those next first steps. Like where do you step out? How do you come back out and into a experience where you are affecting your community, where you can do some outer work? So you caught my attention. I want to say
Mhm.
that there's a thread in there that I wonder, on a very selfish level, I wonder what kind of sort of advice you could have for someone who's coming off of a traumatic experience and trying to become an active community member again.
I think that it's just doing it, you know? It like what you're doing. It's just like taking, it's like for me, what happened, it was like a shift of like the fear, the love, what was pulling me became greater than what was pushing me in the pain. And I'm just like, I'm more pulled by the vision of what I want to create in my future as opposed to like being stuck in the painful past and integrating it. And I also think it's really important to have our community and our safe people around, because I know when we have a trauma just on a brain level, it's like the amygdala separates itself. And so when we have that safe community, it starts integrating with the hippocampus and in communicating so that we can actually understand what happened, and then we can integrate it in our bodies and we can use our pain as purpose. And so that's basically what, having that wisdom and understanding of the brain and the body and the nervous system, and how to continually learn to regulate myself and build core resilience inside of myself and let myself be ruled by this beating heart in me that's like, I will not give up. And no matter what happened in my life, no one has the ability to take this light away. And even if it feels like it's this big right now, I will make it a blazing flame again, because that is the spirit within me that is just like, I will squeeze the life out of all of this experience. I don't want to waste 1 second. And that was the driving force for me. It was just like, I'm done playing small. I'm done hiding. I integrated, and what happened actually was like, I I did a breathwork session, and I had this story for the last 5 years, like I'm broken, I'm this, I'm that, and I saw myself like, I thought it was like wrapped in bandages, and then what happened was it turned into like a chrysalis, and it wasn't bandages or being broken. It was that I was turning to mush, like a chrysalis, and something bigger than myself was emerging, but it felt so uncomfortable. And so just to be with the discomfort, to be comfortable with the discomfort of the growth that was happening, and stop telling the story that I'm broken. I'm changing, and I'm going to use whatever, I got through this experience to be in service, to maybe I could be the voice that someone didn't have the courage to speak at the time. But now that that's always been my medicine, I think, is just like speaking up maybe when no one could. I'm not afraid to do that, and I will continue to do that. So,
Yay, yay,
yeah.
good on you, good
Hmm.
on you. Yeah, at this time here in the U.S. anyway, what's going on culturally around us, to large scale economically, what's happening around us, making it even more difficult to make some of these choices that are sort of expansive choices, when these externals can really keep us hemmed in and smashed down. At least my experience, particularly things like livelihood and how do we continue to interact in this capitalist society, keep that ball rolling, while also everything else that you've said, while also attempting to bring our personhood forward, shine our light into our surroundings, and feed ourselves. Um, that's an interesting one, and I feel
Mhm.
for I have a bunch of really nice younger friends, who are struggling with how to keep that, um, uh, sort of our career or business or even just job level. How do we create that? There's seem to be some neat things on the horizon, but what have you discovered in that arena? I assume that too. You've had some challenges in that space. How do we keep it working?
Yeah, I mean, I just continue to educate myself and put myself, it's like I just finished an AI training. I know all these things are up and coming. I'm just kind of keeping my finger on the pulse of what
Yeah,
is emerging
yeah,
in our culture. And I'm just not, I don't want to be in the mindset of poverty, and I feel like it's like really a mindset too. So I'm just like, where can I create, where can I be in service, where can I keep emerging and educating. I mean, there's all kinds of free pro if you're in that mindset, you're not looking. I call it,
mm,
it's like what sometimes we get into state of emergency, and you need to emerge and see what's going on so that you can actually continue to grow. And like, there's all kinds of free programs you can do online that I've done and that I continue to educate myself with, and just stay again on the cutting edge of like what we can create, and not think in the box.
right,
That's what I think a lot of, it's like we get in this small community and we only think, and I'm like, no, I want the larger scale here. I want to see what's outside of the box, and hit those targets as opposed to just right where I am. So,
yeah.
and we have that capability right now with the internet, and like, the predominantly I'm working online with people. So it's like I don't have like the struggle of just keeping it to the local economy,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
which sometimes we can very much struggle with here for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure, for sure. Especially trying to live in interesting places that are not just crammed into big, population centers and stuff. How do we keep that working? I so appreciate what you just said, though. That was exactly that you sort of pushed against my very question, by
Mhm.
saying that to not get caught in those mindsets, to not get put in that box, not to put myself, for me to not put myself in that box, that is this place that is so pressurized and struggle, which was really nice to hear. And you articulated that really well, because that next level out is the next piece where, um, the not and I don't want to linger in this arena, but the things that are happening in the U.S. here with the left versus right, the red versus blue team, and all of that stuff that can be so. Right now, I'll speak for myself. I was very active in my 20s. I was an activist, literally, working for CalPERG, Osberg, Greenpeace, just out there really screaming about things, and being very, very informed, and then as other things came on and different geopolitical things were happening, I was always very, very informed. And and nowadays, I am the most ignorant I have ever been. I am not plugged into what's happening, and there's a part of me that feels guilt around that currently. Like I should be a better citizen, right? I should be a bit more involved. And on the other hand, I feel really good that I'm not finding myself mired by the dramas of things that aren't directly affecting me. And of course, there's that balance. There's some place around how do I, certainly like the idea of how do I take my um, privilege and do good work with it, or how do I take my position, which is so funny. I have to own that my privilege is just being a white guy raised in a Christian family. That somehow that has allowed certain things to open up for me, and to certain things to not be a struggle for me. And so, how do I use that without getting caught in the dramas of it? And so, I wanted to put out to you the question of sort of civic engagement. Do you have a place in your life where civic engagement um, plays in, or what would you have to say about that piece? Did that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just like for me, I'm plugging sometimes from what's happening out there because oftentimes what we're not even given real information, you
Yeah,
know?
right.
So it's having to sort through that and really be discerning on what's real and what's fake and how they're trying, because I feel like in some way there is a larger picture at hand that's trying to veer us in directions sometimes and put a lot of fear into our humanity and isolate us and do these, after having experienced a very abusive situation. I did a lot of research on it, and I see that that's a lot of what's happening on, I had it on a micro level, but this is happening on a macro level, and I can see it very clearly, luckily. That was definitely the one benefit of it because I did a lot of research on it. So I tend to keep myself a lot unplugged and doing like projects like you're doing, for instance. Like that's how we change the world. Every dollar we spend, every kindness we emanate to somebody, like that to me is the news. It's new. It's not the old. We're being controlled and programmed, and it's like how people. I do so many meditations every day that I had to pull myself out of like deep hellish places, and so it's like I can't afford in my own body because it will make me sick if I'm paying attention to the news all the time. So we just have to be cautious. It's like learning to keep ourselves regulated and not get overly, like charged by all of the stuff. And like, I know I'm on the trajectory to create the world I want to live in. I am not fixated on what's breaking down and what's collapsing. I'm focusing on what are we growing right now.
Nice, nice, excellent. Well put.
Mhm.
Thank you, thank you. Um, we just did a really nice spin through like three or four of my basic sections in a different way. Thank you. You're very nonlinear. I appreciate you very much.
Yeah, that's true.
very, very much. Okay, and here's really the last major question, if you will, that I want to put out. And that is it's a little bit more amorphous and stuff, and it might be a real short answer. But in this day and age, with the reach that we have and how social media works in so many funny, strange ways, if by chance you had the undivided attention of millions of people for just a moment, what would you want to say? Like what direction would you want to point people? What if you just had a moment where millions of people actually were paying attention? What would you say?
Mm.
Take your time too. It doesn't have to be a
Yeah.
small thing.
I mean, the first thing that pops up is make your own self a kinder place to live.
Mm,
Having studied the body and the brain and the nervous system and the heart, our heart is the greatest intelligence inside of us, and yet we're so analytically trained to not to be disconnected from the body and from source, which is right here. So find your heart, and that's where the source of life is, and let that rule you rather than your head and all the compartmentalized places. Heal your trauma, understand your nervous system. Like when we there's three things to to actually re-engage healthy brain activity, which is becoming more self-aware. So what am I noticing? What am I feeling? Put emphasis on like noticing your feeling and your body and your heart. And then what that does is it helps to calm your nervous system so that you can access the more intelligent part of the brain, which develops empathy for yourself, for your experience. It doesn't matter what you're experiencing, shame, guilt, anger. It's like, but when we're at war with that inside of ourselves, it creates a lot of, war outside as well, I think. So empathy, and then learning to differentiate. Like, this is, oh, that's my 4-year-old active, or that's my traumatized person that was in COVID that's afraid, just like learning to distinguish and differentiate these parts of myself. And so when I can do that inside of me, then I can also like take the time. It helps me to work through conflict with others. Like, what is my experience? What is your experience? Wow, now we can create a bridge rather than a war. Because when we're at war with ourselves, we create war outside, is my opinion. So it's like really taking the time to know yourself and to know, what you love and how to love, and knowing that nothing is bad inside of you. The heart does not say, this experience is bad, this experience is good. It says all experiences have value, and how can that bring value to me and to the world I live in? So,
yeah. Thanks.
yeah,
Gosh,
yeah,
I'm glad I asked.
yeah. Thank you. I learned something too. Never know what's going to come out of my mouth.
So, thank you so much for being willing to take some time. I really, really appreciate that. And I hope that in the future I can possibly tap you on the shoulder and throw a couple specific questions. Now that I have a better understanding, I want to say just from spending this half hour with you that I have a much better understanding who I think who you are, and so I hope that when it comes up later on in this project and some of the associated, that perhaps I could tap you on the shoulder and
Yeah,
throw a couple specific questions at you and see how you respond. I really really have enjoyed this time, and your articulations are a joy to listen to. Um,
yeah.
so
Awesome.
thank you,
Thank
thank you.
you. hmm I call
Now,
them articulations. It's just like I just listen to what's emerging. I don't pre think it, or it just comes out. So
beautiful, beautiful.